The summer heat in London was unbearable that Tuesday afternoon. Tourists crowded around Buckingham Palace, their cameras clicking constantly as they tried to capture the perfect shot of the famous Queen's Guard. Among them stood Marcus Thompson, a 28-year-old software developer from Ohio, who had saved for 2 years to afford this European vacation. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he joined the growing crowd outside the palace gates. He had been walking around London for hours, visiting every landmark on his carefully planned itinerary. His water bottle was nearly empty and his phone battery was dying. But he was determined to get that Instagram-worthy photo of the Royal Guards. The guard standing at attention was Sergeant James Mitchell, a decorated soldier with 8 years of service in the British Army. He had been stationed at his post for over an hour, standing perfectly still despite the scorching heat. His red tunic was soaked with sweat underneath, but years of training had taught him to remain motionless regardless of discomfort. Marcus pushed through the crowd, trying to get closer to the guard. He noticed how the soldier's face was red and sweaty under his tall bearskin hat. Other tourists were making faces and trying to get reactions from the guard, but Sergeant Mitchell remained stone-faced, staring straight ahead as protocol demanded. "Look at him," Marcus whispered to the woman standing next to him. "He must be dying in this heat. That uniform looks so heavy and he can't even move to wipe his face." The woman, an elderly tourist from Germany, nodded sympathetically. "It does seem cruel to make them stand there like statues in weather like this," she agreed. Marcus watched as drops of sweat rolled down the guard's face. The young American felt genuinely sorry for the soldier. Back home in Ohio, Marcus was known for his kindness and willingness to help others. He volunteered at local shelters and always went out of his way to help people in need. Seeing someone in apparent distress triggered his natural instinct to help. He looked down at his water bottle. It was still half full with cool water he had bought just minutes earlier from a nearby vendor. The ice cubes were still floating inside, making soft clinking sounds as he moved. Marcus thought about how refreshing that cold water would feel if he were in the guard's position. Other tourists continued to pose for selfies and make jokes, but Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the soldier's obvious discomfort. He had read about the Queen's Guard before his trip and knew they were real soldiers, not just tourist attractions. These were men who served their country with honor and deserved respect. The crowd around him grew larger and more boisterous. Children were running around. Adults were laughing loudly, and everyone seemed to be treating the whole scene like entertainment. But Marcus saw something different. He saw a human being suffering in silence, bound by duty to endure whatever came his way. Sergeant Mitchell, meanwhile, was indeed struggling with the heat. His training had prepared him for many things, but this particular day was testing his limits. The temperature had reached an unusual high for London, and his heavy ceremonial uniform felt like a furnace. Still, he remained focused on his duty. He thought about his fellow soldiers serving in much harsher conditions around the world, and drew strength from their example. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He couldn't just stand there and watch someone suffer when he had the means to help. His grandmother had always taught him that kindness was never wrong, even if others didn't understand it. He stepped forward, separating himself from the crowd. Several tourists noticed his movement and turned their cameras toward him, expecting another attempt at getting a reaction from the guard. Marcus didn't notice the cameras focusing on him. His attention was entirely on the sweating soldier in front of him. "Excuse me," Marcus said quietly as he approached. "You look really hot. I have some cold water here if you want it." Sergeant Mitchell's eyes flickered slightly toward Marcus, but he remained at attention. His training told him to ignore all civilian interactions while on duty. But something about the young American's genuine concern touched him. Most tourists treated the guards like living statues or comedy props, but this man seemed to see him as a fellow human being. Marcus unscrewed the cap of his water bottle and stepped even closer. "I know you probably can't respond, but you really look like you need this," he said softly. "I'm going to help you cool down a little." Before anyone could react, Marcus gently poured a small amount of cool water over the guard's forehead and temples. The water ran down Sergeant Mitchell's face, mixing with his sweat and providing instant relief from the oppressive heat. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed rapidly as tourists captured what they thought was an outrageous breach of protocol. Some people laughed nervously, others looked shocked, and a few began recording videos on their phones. Marcus seemed oblivious to the commotion he had created. He was focused entirely on whether his gesture had helped the soldier. For a brief moment, Sergeant Mitchell's eyes met Marcus's. In that instant, both men understood something that the crowd around them missed completely. This wasn't a prank or a disrespectful act. It was one human being helping another in a moment of genuine need. Palace security officers were already moving toward them, their radios crackling with urgent communications. Tourist police began pushing through the crowd, and the atmosphere quickly shifted from curious entertainment to serious concern. Marcus finally realized what he had done. As the reality of the situation hit him, his face went pale. He looked around at the staring faces, the pointing fingers, and the approaching security officers. What had seemed like a simple act of kindness now appeared to be a major international incident. The water bottle slipped from his nervous hands and clattered on the pavement, rolling toward the palace gates. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that had fallen over the crowd. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next to the American tourist who had dared to touch the Queen's Guard. The security officers reached Marcus within seconds. Their hands moved toward their radios and equipment as they surrounded him. The lead officer, Inspector Sarah Collins, had been working palace security for 12 years and had seen every possible tourist incident imaginable. But this situation felt different from the usual pranks and boundary violations. "Sir, I need you to step back immediately," Inspector Collins commanded firmly but not aggressively. She could see the confusion and fear in Marcus's eyes. "Please keep your hands visible and move away from the guard post." Marcus raised his hands instinctively, his heart pounding. "I'm sorry, I was just trying to help," he stammered. He looked so hot and uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The crowd of tourists pressed closer, smartphones capturing every moment. Marcus could hear people whispering in different languages, some laughing, others expressing shock. A few tourists were already uploading videos to social media, adding their own commentary about the crazy American who had assaulted a royal guard. Inspector Collins noticed something unusual. Instead of immediately disciplining or removing the tourist, Sergeant Mitchell had given her a subtle signal. It was barely noticeable to untrained eyes, but Collins recognized it immediately. The guard was indicating that he did not consider this a hostile act. "What exactly did you do?" Collins asked Marcus, her tone remaining professional but becoming slightly less stern. "I poured some water on his forehead," Marcus explained, pointing to his dropped water bottle. "He was sweating so much and it's so hot today. I thought it might help cool him down. I know it was probably wrong, but I couldn't just watch him suffer like that." Behind them, Sergeant Mitchell continued his duty stance, but he was listening to every word. The cool water had indeed provided relief, and he was grateful for the gesture, even though protocol prevented him from expressing it. He had served in Afghanistan, where local civilians sometimes offered water to British soldiers during patrols. The kindness of strangers in difficult moments was something he had learned to appreciate. Inspector Collins studied Marcus's face carefully. In her experience, troublemakers usually showed signs of defiance, amusement, or aggression after incidents. This young man showed only genuine concern and regret. His body language suggested honesty, and his explanation matched what she had observed on the security cameras. "Are you aware that approaching and touching the Queen's Guard is strictly prohibited?" Collins asked, testing Marcus's knowledge and intentions. "I honestly didn't think about that in the moment," Marcus admitted. "I know they're not supposed to move or react to people, but I've never heard specific rules about not helping them. Where I'm from, if someone looks like they need help, you help them. It's just what decent people do." A palace supervisor arrived on the scene, having been alerted by radio. Commander Robert Hayes had overseen guard operations for 15 years and prided himself on maintaining the dignity and tradition of the Queen's Guard. He approached the group with visible irritation. "What's the situation here?" Commander Hayes demanded, Looking at the gathered crowd and the tourist in custody, Inspector Collins briefed him quickly on what had occurred. As she spoke, Commander Hayes studied both Marcus and Sergeant Mitchell. He noticed that his guard remained calm and composed, showing no signs of distress or anger about the incident. "Young man," Commander Hayes addressed Marcus directly, "do you understand the seriousness of what you've done? These guards are not props or entertainments. They are active military personnel performing official duties." "Yes, sir, I understand that completely," Marcus replied respectfully. "I have great respect for military service. My grandfather served in World War II, and my brother is in the Marines. I would never intentionally disrespect a soldier. I was genuinely trying to help because I could see he was struggling with the heat." Commander Hayes paused. The tourist's reference to military family members and his obvious respect for service changed the commander's perspective slightly. He looked more closely at Sergeant Mitchell, noticing for the first time how the soldier's uniform was soaked with perspiration. Despite the early hour, the growing crowd was becoming more difficult to manage. Tourists were pushing closer, trying to get better photos and videos. Several news reporters had arrived, having been alerted by social media posts about the incident. The situation was quickly escalating beyond a simple tourist violation. "We need to move this discussion away from the public area," Commander Hayes decided. "The crowd is becoming disruptive to normal operations." Inspector Collins began guiding Marcus toward a side entrance to the palace grounds. As they walked, Marcus looked back at Sergeant Mitchell with genuine concern. "Is he going to be okay?" Marcus asked. "Will he get in trouble because of what I did? Because that would make me feel terrible. I never wanted to cause problems for him." This question surprised both security officers. Most tourists involved in incidents were primarily concerned about their own consequences, not the welfare of the guards they had bothered. "The guard will be fine," Inspector Collins assured him. "But we do need to discuss your actions and determine appropriate consequences." As they entered a small security office, Marcus noticed several monitors showing different views of the palace grounds. He could see Sergeant Mitchell still at his post, now with an increased crowd around him. People were pointing and taking pictures, clearly hoping to witness more drama. "I've made everything worse for him, haven't I?" Marcus said, feeling genuinely distressed. Now he has even more people staring at him and causing distractions. Commander Hayes and Inspector Collins exchanged glances. This was definitely not the typical response they expected from someone who had just violated palace security protocols. Meanwhile, outside, Sergeant Mitchell continued his duty despite the increased attention. But something had changed in his demeanor. The small act of kindness from the American tourist had reminded him that most people, regardless of their nationality or background, were fundamentally decent. It gave him strength to continue his duty with renewed purpose. The incident was already spreading across social media platforms. Videos titled "American Tourist Attacks Royal Guard and Crazy Tourist Throws Water at Queen's Guard" were gaining thousands of views within minutes. But the real story behind the headlines was much more complex than anyone realized. Inside the security office, Marcus sat nervously while Commander Hayes reviewed the incident footage on multiple camera angles. The videos clearly showed the American tourist's gentle approach and careful pouring of water, completely different from the aggressive attack that social media was already describing. "Tell me about yourself," Commander Hayes said, settling into his chair across from Marcus. "What brings you to London, and what do you do back home?" Marcus explained his job as a software developer and his long-planned vacation to Europe. He talked about his family's military background and his volunteer work at homeless shelters. As he spoke, Inspector Collins took notes. But she found herself becoming more impressed than suspicious. "In my work with homeless veterans," Marcus continued, "I've learned to recognize when someone is suffering in silence. That soldier out there had the same look I've seen on faces of people who are enduring hardship but won't ask for help. I couldn't just ignore that." Commander Hayes studied the young American carefully. In his years of military service, he had developed a strong ability to judge character. Everything about Marcus suggested genuine sincerity and good intentions. Despite the unconventional nature of his actions, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. A young officer entered and whispered something to Inspector Collins. Her eyebrows raised in surprise as she listened. "Sir," she addressed Commander Hayes, "we're receiving multiple reports from the public about the incident. But they're not what we expected." She handed him a tablet showing various social media posts and comments. While some people were indeed criticizing Marcus's actions, a surprising number were defending him. Comments like, "Finally. Someone who sees guards as human beings, and this man showed more compassion than anyone else there," were gaining hundreds of likes. More interesting were the responses from military families and veterans. Former guards were sharing their own experiences of enduring extreme weather while on ceremonial duty. Many expressed gratitude that someone had finally shown concern for their well-being rather than treating them like tourist attractions. "There's more," Inspector Collins continued. "We've received a call from Sergeant Mitchell's commanding officer. He's requesting permission to speak with you about the incident." Commander Hayes was puzzled. It was highly unusual for a guard to request involvement in disciplinary proceedings, especially when they were the supposed victim of the incident. 20 minutes later, Captain David Reynolds arrived at the security office. He was Sergeant Mitchell's direct superior and had served with him on 2 overseas deployments. Reynolds had a reputation for being fair but firm with his soldiers. "Commander Hayes," Captain Reynolds began formally, "I've reviewed the incident reports and spoken with Sergeant Mitchell during his break rotation. I believe there are aspects of this situation that warrant special consideration." He turned to Marcus. "Sergeant Mitchell asked me to convey his appreciation for your concern about his welfare. He wants you to know that your gesture was received in the spirit it was intended." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Is he really okay? I've been so worried that I got him in trouble." "Quite the opposite," Captain Reynolds replied. "Sergeant Mitchell has been dealing with some personal challenges recently. His father has been seriously ill, and he's been struggling with stress and worry while maintaining his duties. Your act of kindness reminded him that there are still good people in the world who care about others." The room fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. What had appeared to be a simple tourist violation was actually a moment of human connection that had provided comfort to a soldier in emotional distress. "However," Captain Reynolds continued, "we still must address the protocol violations. The rules exist for important security reasons, regardless of good intentions." Commander Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Thompson, while we appreciate your motivations, approaching the guards is strictly forbidden. These protocols protect both the guards and the public. What if your water bottle had contained something harmful? What if other tourists decided to copy your actions for less noble reasons?" Marcus understood completely. "You're absolutely right, sir. I should have thought about the bigger picture. I was focused on helping one person, but I didn't consider how my actions might affect security procedures or encourage others to break the rules." Inspector Collins had been quietly reviewing more social media posts during their conversation. "Commander," she interjected, "you should see this. The story is gaining international attention, but it's taking an unexpected direction." News outlets were beginning to pick up the story, but instead of focusing on rule-breaking, many were highlighting the human compassion angle. Headlines like "American Tourist Shows Kindness to British Guard" and "When Humanity Overcomes Protocol" were starting to appear alongside. The more sensational versions, a particularly viral video, had been posted by the elderly German woman who had witnessed the original incident. Her post, translated into multiple languages, read, "Today I saw something beautiful. A young man from America saw a soldier suffering in the heat and chose kindness over indifference. The world needs more people like this." Military families from around the world were sharing their own stories of difficult ceremonial duties and expressing gratitude that someone had shown concern for a soldier's well-being. Veterans were posting about the importance of recognizing the humanity of people in uniform. "This is unprecedented," Commander Hayes admitted. "I've never seen a protocol violation generate this kind of positive public response." Captain Reynolds suggested an unusual approach. Given the unique circumstances and the positive outcome, I would like to propose an alternative to standard disciplinary measures. He outlined a plan that would satisfy security concerns while acknowledging the positive intentions behind Marcus's actions. Instead of simply banning Marcus from palace grounds or issuing formal warnings, they could use this incident as a teaching opportunity. We could arrange for Mr. Thompson to meet with Sergeant Mitchell properly, off-duty and away from the ceremonial setting, Captain Reynolds suggested. This would allow both men to have a proper conversation about military service, cultural differences, and the importance of following established protocols. Commander Hayes considered this proposal carefully. It was highly irregular, but then again, the entire situation was unlike anything in his experience. Outside, the crowd around the palace had grown even larger as news of the incident spread. Tour guides were pointing out the spot where the water incident had occurred, and visitors were asking guards about what had happened. The story was becoming part of the palace's unofficial legend. The meeting between Marcus and Sergeant Mitchell was arranged for the following evening at a quiet pub near the barracks, away from the chaos of palace tourism. Marcus arrived early, nervous about facing the soldier he had unknowingly helped. He had spent the entire day reading about the Queen's Guard traditions and feeling increasingly embarrassed about his cultural ignorance. Sergeant Mitchell entered the pub wearing civilian clothes, looking remarkably different from the imposing figure Marcus had encountered at the palace. Without his ceremonial uniform and bearskin hat, James appeared younger and more approachable. He spotted Marcus immediately and walked over with a slight smile. "You must be the American who tried to drown me yesterday," James said with gentle humor, extending his hand. "I'm James Mitchell, though I suppose you know that already." Marcus shook his hand gratefully. "Marcus Thompson, and I'm really sorry about what happened. I've been learning about your traditions, and I realize how inappropriate my actions were." "Sit down, mate," James said, settling into the booth across from Marcus. "Let's talk about what really happened out there." As they ordered drinks, James began sharing his perspective on the incident. He explained how the ceremonial duties, while an honor, could indeed be physically and mentally challenging, especially during extreme weather or personal stress. "The thing is," James continued, "most tourists see us as living statues or photo opportunities. They make faces, tell jokes, and try to get reactions. But you were the first person who looked at me and saw someone who might need help." Marcus learned about James's military background and his recent struggles with his father's illness. The soldier had been standing guard while worrying about family emergency phone calls, financial stress from medical bills, and the possibility of requesting leave during a critical time in his career. "When you poured that water on my head," James admitted, "it wasn't just cooling. It was like someone finally acknowledged that I was human. It gave me strength to get through the rest of my shift." Their conversation continued for hours. Marcus shared his own family's military history and his volunteer experiences helping veterans. James talked about the honor and burden of representing British traditions while dealing with personal challenges. "I need you to understand something important," James said seriously. "The protocols exist for good reasons. If everyone started approaching guards with good intentions, it would create chaos and security risks. But I also want you to know that your kindness mattered to me personally." As news of their meeting spread through military channels, something unexpected began happening. Other guards and military personnel started sharing their own stories of difficult ceremonial duties and moments when civilian kindness had made a difference. Former tomb of the unknown soldier guard from Arlington. National Cemetery posted about American tourists who had quietly shown respect during challenging weather conditions. Swiss guards from Vatican City shared experiences of visitors who had demonstrated genuine concern for their well-being during long ceremonial stands. The incident was creating a global conversation about the humanity of people in ceremonial military roles and the balance between maintaining dignity and acknowledging human needs. Back at Buckingham Palace, Commander Hayes was dealing with unprecedented media attention. News outlets from around the world were requesting interviews about the water incident, and the palace's communications department was struggling to manage the story. "Sir," Inspector Collins reported, "we're receiving requests from military historians, cultural exchange programs, and even documentary filmmakers. Everyone wants to understand what made this incident different from typical tourist violations." The palace administration was torn between maintaining traditional protocol strictness and acknowledging the positive aspects of the situation. They had never faced a protocol violation that generated sympathy for both the visitor and the guard. Meanwhile, Marcus's story was spreading beyond military circles. Social media influencers were using the incident to discuss cultural sensitivity, human compassion, and the importance of seeing beyond uniforms and roles to recognize shared humanity. A video blogger from Canada created a thoughtful analysis of how different cultures approach authority figures and ceremonial traditions. Her video, titled "When Kindness Crosses Borders," gained millions of views and sparked discussions about cultural differences in dozens of countries. Marcus found himself receiving messages from people around the world. Some criticized his actions as disrespectful, but many more shared stories of times when small acts of kindness had made significant differences in their lives. A particularly moving message came from the family of a military chaplain who wrote, "Our son serves with the honor guard at Arlington, and your story reminded us that behind every uniform is someone's child, dealing with the same human struggles as everyone else." James, too, was receiving unexpected attention. His fellow soldiers were treating him differently, not with mockery for being involved in an incident, but with increased respect for how he had handled the situation with grace and dignity. "The strangest thing," James told Marcus during their second meeting, "is that I feel like I'm doing my job better now. Knowing that people recognize our humanity makes it easier to maintain the discipline and traditions we're meant to represent." Their friendship was developing naturally, bridging cultural and social differences through shared values of service, respect, and human decency. Marcus was learning about British military culture, while James gained insights into American perspectives on authority and social interaction. The palace administration finally decided on an official response to the incident. Rather than focusing on rule violations or disciplinary measures, they chose to highlight the positive aspects of cross-cultural understanding and respect for military service. A carefully worded statement acknowledged that while protocols must be maintained, the incident had demonstrated the universal human values of compassion and respect that both nations cherished. The statement praised both Marcus's good intentions and James's professional handling of an unusual situation. This response satisfied most critics while avoiding the appearance of encouraging future protocol violations. It also positioned the palace as understanding and human rather than rigidly traditional. 3 months after the water incident, Marcus received an invitation that changed his life completely. The British Embassy in Washington, D.C. contacted him about participating in a cultural exchange program between American and British military families. The program had been expanded partly because of the positive response to his story. "Mr. Thompson," the embassy official explained over the phone, "your experience has highlighted the importance of cultural understanding between our nations. We would like you to consider becoming a civilian ambassador for military family support programs." Marcus was stunned. What had started as a simple vacation mistake was becoming an opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives. The program would involve working with military families on both sides of the Atlantic, helping bridge cultural gaps and providing support during difficult deployments. Meanwhile, in London, James was facing his own life changes. The attention from the incident had led to unexpected opportunities within the military. His commanding officers had noticed his mature handling of the situation and his ability to communicate effectively with civilians from different backgrounds. "Captain," Reynolds called James into his office with surprising news. "Mitchell, you've been selected for the Military Cultural Liaison Program. It's a new initiative partly inspired by your recent experience with the American tourist. The program would involve working with international military exchanges, helping foreign officers understand British military traditions while learning about other military cultures. It was exactly the kind of career development James had hoped for but never expected. James immediately thought of Marcus and sent him an email sharing the good news. Their friendship had continued through regular correspondence, with Marcus learning more about British military life and James gaining insights into American volunteer culture and civilian military support. The ripple effects of their story continued to spread in unexpected ways. Military museums in both countries began developing exhibits about the human side of ceremonial duties. The Tower of London created a display showing how guards throughout history had dealt with challenging weather and personal hardships while maintaining their duties. A documentary filmmaker named Sarah Joan approached both men about participating in a film about modern military service and civilian military relationships. The project would follow several stories of connections between military personnel and civilians, using Marcus and James's experience as a central narrative. What interests me, Sarah explained to them via video call, is how a moment of human connection can transcend cultural boundaries and create positive change. Your story shows that military service is about more than just uniforms and protocols. Marcus was initially hesitant about appearing in a documentary, but James convinced him that their story could help other people understand the human aspects of military service. They agreed to participate with the understanding that the film would focus on positive messages about service and cultural understanding. The documentary filming took place over several months, with cameras following Marcus through his volunteer work with veterans and James through his new duties in the Cultural Liaison program. The filmmakers captured not just their personal story, but the broader impact their incident had created. During filming, they met other people whose lives had been touched by their story. A military chaplain in Germany had started a program encouraging civilian support for ceremonial guards after reading about the water incident. A veterans organization in Australia had created a campaign about recognizing the humanity of people in uniform, directly inspired by the positive response to Marcus's actions. Perhaps most significantly, they met the families of other ceremonial guards who shared their own stories of difficult duties and moments when civilian kindness had made a difference. These meetings reinforced their understanding of how small acts of compassion could have far-reaching effects. The palace had also made quiet changes to support guard welfare during extreme weather conditions. While maintaining the dignity and tradition of ceremonial duties, they implemented better hydration protocols and more frequent rotation schedules during heat waves. These changes were not publicly announced, but they directly improved the working conditions for guards. Marcus's employer in Ohio learned about his involvement in the cultural exchange program and offered to sponsor his continued participation. The software company saw value in having an employee involved in international goodwill initiatives, and they allowed Marcus flexible time to continue his work with military families. James's father's health had improved significantly, and the family credited the positive attention from the incident with helping them through a difficult period. The support messages from around the world had reminded them that people cared about military families and their struggles. It's funny how things work out, James reflected during one of their filmed conversations. What could have been an embarrassing incident for both of us became an opportunity to serve in ways we never imagined. Marcus nodded in agreement. I learned that good intentions aren't enough without cultural understanding, but I also learned that human kindness can bridge almost any gap if people are willing to listen to each other. Their story was being used in military academies as a case study in civilian military relations and cultural sensitivity. Officer candidates were learning about the importance of understanding different perspectives while maintaining military discipline and traditions. The documentary, titled Beyond the Uniform, premiered at several film festivals before being acquired by streaming services. Critics praised its balanced portrayal of military life and its focus on human connections rather than political issues during the premiere in London. Marcus and James were surprised by the diversity of the audience. Military personnel, tourists, cultural researchers, and ordinary citizens attended, all drawn by different aspects of their story. The Queen's Guard had even arranged a special ceremony acknowledging both men's contributions to military-civilian understanding. While maintaining the formality required by tradition, the ceremony recognized their role in fostering positive international relations. 2 years after the water incident, Marcus stood once again outside Buckingham Palace. But this time, everything was different. He was no longer a confused tourist with a dying phone battery and poor cultural awareness. Now he wore a visitor's badge identifying him as a military family liaison officer, accompanying a group of American military families on an official cultural exchange visit. James approached from the palace gates, resplendent in his dress uniform but now bearing the insignia of a staff sergeant and cultural liaison specialist. The two men shook hands warmly, their friendship now a professional partnership that had helped dozens of military families navigate cultural differences during international assignments. Hard to believe it all started with you trying to drown me, James said with a grin, causing the American families to laugh. They had all heard the story and were eager to meet the famous pair. The group included military children who would be attending British schools, spouses who would be living in military housing near British bases, and service members participating in joint training exercises. Marcus and James had developed a program that helped ease these transitions through cultural preparation and ongoing support. 2 years ago, I thought military traditions were rigid and inflexible, Marcus addressed the group. I learned that traditions can be both strong and adaptable, and that understanding the reasoning behind customs makes them more meaningful rather than less. James added, and I learned that civilians aren't trying to disrespect military customs when they don't understand them. Most people want to show support. They just need guidance on appropriate ways to do it. Their program had become a model for other international military exchanges. The success rate of family adjustments to overseas assignments had improved significantly for participants. In their cultural preparation courses, the palace had quietly implemented several of their suggestions for managing tourist interactions with ceremonial guards. New signs explained the guards' roles and the importance of respectful behavior, while staff members were trained to educate visitors about military traditions rather than simply enforcing rules. Marcus had left his software job to work full-time with military family support organizations. His experience with the guard incident had opened doors to a career he never knew he wanted, but that perfectly suited his skills and personality. He now managed programs supporting military families across 3 continents. James had been promoted ahead of schedule and was being considered for officer training. His ability to communicate across cultures and his understanding of both military tradition and civilian perspectives made him valuable for international assignments. He had already served temporary duties in Canada and Australia, helping establish similar cultural liaison programs. The documentary about their story had won several awards and was being used by military organizations worldwide as a training tool. More importantly, it had inspired other unexpected friendships between military personnel and civilians who initially misunderstood each other's perspectives. A particularly gratifying development was the water bottle initiative, started by military families in hot climate bases. Civilians were encouraged to donate cooling supplies to ceremonial guards and honor guards during extreme weather, but through official channels that maintained protocol and security. The program had prevented several heat-related incidents while fostering positive civilian-military relations. During their palace visit, Marcus and James were introduced to the current guards on duty. These young soldiers all knew their story and had been trained in the cultural sensitivity protocols that emerged from the original incident. The biggest change, one of the current guards told them, is that we're taught to see interactions with tourists as opportunities for cultural education rather than just potential security problems. It makes the duty more meaningful. The families in their group observed the changing of the guard ceremony with deeper understanding than typical tourists. They understood the historical significance, the physical demands, and the personal dedication required of the guards. Several children asked thoughtful questions about military service that impressed the palace staff. As the day concluded, Marcus and James reflected on how their accidental friendship had evolved into something neither had anticipated. What began as a cultural misunderstanding had become a bridge between nations and communities. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just walked past that day, Marcus mused as they watched the sunset over London. I think we would have found each other somehow, James replied. Good people have a way of connecting, even when circumstances seem to work against them. Their story continued to inspire others long after the initial incident. Military academies used it to teach cultural sensitivity. Tourism organizations referenced it in materials about respectful travel. Mental health professionals cited it as an example of how small acts of kindness could have profound impacts on people dealing with stress. The German woman who had first posted the positive video about Marcus's actions had become a minor celebrity in her own right, advocating for better understanding between tourists and local customs in various countries. She credited watching Marcus's kindness with inspiring her to speak up when she witnessed positive interactions between people from different cultures. Marcus and James received letters from around the world, from people sharing their own stories of unexpected friendships formed across cultural or professional boundaries. Parents wrote about teaching their children to look for opportunities to help others, even when the appropriate response wasn't immediately obvious. Military families specifically reached out to thank them for highlighting the human aspects of service life. Many felt that the attention their story brought to military family challenges had led to improved support programs and greater public understanding of their experiences. As they prepared to return to their respective homes and duties, Marcus and James knew their friendship would continue regardless of geography. They had learned that genuine human connections could overcome almost any obstacle, including cultural differences, institutional protocols, and even international boundaries. The water incident that had started as an embarrassing mistake had become a symbol of the power of human kindness and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to recognize shared humanity. Their story proved that sometimes the most significant changes begin with the simplest gestures, and that good intentions, combined with willingness to learn and grow, can create positive impacts far beyond what anyone initially imagines. Standing together outside the palace where their friendship began, Marcus and James represented the best possibilities of international cooperation and mutual understanding. Their story would continue inspiring others to choose kindness over indifference and understanding over judgment, one small act of human compassion at a time.